As time passes, more and more people realize that simply making the main character of an anime stoic, apathetic, and overpowered does not necessarily make them any less infuriating to watch. Shonen was, and still is, to an extent, the most dominating genre in all of anime. In its fundamental elements, the concept of shonen portrays the development of a weak protagonist, slowly growing into a strong, reliable person. In theory, its design is identical to that of every idle mobile game, think Cookie Clicker. By nature, it provides large amounts of gratification periodically. As the main character overcomes an obstacle, they gain power. Just as you would spend a few minutes clicking on the cookie just to unlock the next upgrade. It's a mixture of labor and satisfaction that holds you, the relief that engages the pleasure center of your brain. However, just as when you download your 13th idle game of the week, you realize that the hook is still there. That sporadic dopamine boosts, however, diminished in their intensity. Like a drug with diminishing returns, the first time you consume it, it's like feeling heaven consuming your mind. Eventually, whilst the premise changes, and every time you start anew, you feel a bit of the ecstasy that you once felt, you realize that it just doesn't have the appeal it once had. As such, people started to get bored of the generic weak to strong premise. And thus began the formation of a new genre, one that transcended shonen, and one that seeked to completely undermine its appeal. This was completely revolutionary. Whilst the concept was quite prevalent already throughout Japanese light novels, in anime, which was the medium consumed by the majority, it was nearly unheard of. It was like finding out that you could hack Cookie Clicker by typing a command into the Inspect Element tab. Instantly, you could give yourself millions, billions, trillions of cookies without having to wait a single second. Purchasing every upgrade there was, your brain was flooded with more ecstasy than it had ever felt before. This upgrade that would have taken weeks to obtain, get it right now. With that, you could feel like God. Life has never been better. You had all the power under your fingertips. All that mattered now was how you used it. Or so you thought. In reality, you might have enjoyed it for a few minutes, maybe an hour if you were really invested. However, it's not long before you realize how empty the game really is. Without the pain, can you really be excited by the gain? Anime is the same. Hidden under a much more colourful, action-packed and novel filter, you get distracted from its fundamental flaws. Unlike cheating and Cookie Clicker, the sense of adrenaline, of euphoria, of bliss lasts much longer. Maybe even all throughout your younger years, entertaining you for most of your childhood. It's not your fault that you didn't realize the blank simplicity of most anime. Children are much easily distracted. However, there would eventually come a time when you grow conscious to the imperfections, the blemishes, and the inadequacy of most anime. It becomes clear to you that these shows were targeted towards the immature, towards those who weren't capable of distinguishing between good and bad. And that's when you realize that most anime would be classified as bad. It's obvious when the protagonist is done right and when they're done wrong. If you want an example of how they're done wrong, just think to any isekai you've watched in the past years. Aside from a few outliers, most of them, put bluntly, are dog shit. There are several factors when it comes to doing Overpowered correctly. I'll slowly go through them in the several part series, so stay tuned. There are three main elements that an anime, especially one with already established main character, needs to stay engaging. Whilst a perfect anime would achieve all of them, doing even a single one of these elements well would be good enough to make a good anime. First of all, the protagonist actually needs to be consistent. This specific category is a little more nuanced than just consistency, but it's mainly saying that there needs to be ample justification for every element of the protagonist. For example, in the case of Classroom of the Elite, Ayanokoji has a logical and sensical backstory, one which most main characters of the same genre lack. The fact that there is a developed justification for his abilities at all is already more than most anime go on to develop. I'll talk more about the White Room specifically in the next parts of the series, but just for context, the White Room is an experimental facility that hopes to create, at least in theory, the perfect human. For now, I'll refer to all isekai anime protagonists as one, since, for the most part, they all suffer from the same problems, mainly the lack of a coherent, rational thought process and a compelling reason for having their specific ideals. Let me explain. Let's take the Asterix War as an example. The main character, Ayato Amagiri, suffers from a whole range of technical writing problems, but mainly he lacks consistency and reasoning, both of which are themes that I'm talking about in this section. When I say consistency, I mean the uniformity of all of his behaviors. For example, on one hand, he sells himself as an apathetic, listless person who can't be bothered doing anything, while simultaneously being someone who is willing to go the extra mile to do a good deed or help out someone else. He's willing to climb an entire dorm just to hand back a handkerchief. He's willing to climb an entire dorm just to hand a handkerchief back to a girl, yet he's always complaining about things being a hassle. He's willing to step in to help a maiden in trouble, with no benefit to himself, but then complains whenever they try to go any further. This lack of consistency causes the characterization to feel childish, the author's intrinsic desire to force the main character into being both a cold, unenergetic self-insert and a golden boy with pure morals that all the girls fall for, causes him to be a bland, annoying, and immature protagonist. If there's one thing that all well-written apathetic main characters have in common, it's that they're willing or programmed to stay true to their reserved nature even in accentuating circumstances. Ayanokoji will keep himself out of trouble even if it means sacrificing someone close to him. He will draw a clear line before the relationships he has with others, always valuing his own self-preservation above the needs of anyone else. And most importantly, he will make decisions not based on emotion, but based on rational calculations of whether the transaction will benefit him. I'm not trying to say that Ayanokoji is a perfectly well-written protagonist. The classroom of the elite story suffers many flaws that's common to most other anime. However, Ayanokoji's characterization is one that should be praised for its dedication to realism. His character is written in a way so that it's clear what his ultimate desires are. He will not randomly break his ideals in a scene or cough up some contrived explanation as to why he's suddenly helping someone else with no benefit to himself. It's clear to the audience that Ayanokoji does not care about and is not affected by the emotions of others. This is something that is communicated to the audience in episode 1 and stays consistent, even up to the latest chapter of the light novel. So, I guess I didn't get to talk about Ayanokoji as much as I would have liked in this video since I was writing the script and then it kind of just trailed off into whatever direction it went. So, in the next few videos, I'll probably talk about him a bit more. I'm thinking of talking about the White Room since Volume 0 just came out recently, so yeah, stay tuned, I guess.